killed a man, and he'd obviously done a lot of other things that were wrong in his life. And of course, the same with various other men who lived through time. They were not perfect men. They all had problems. I mean, if you think of Elijah, who was a very brave man, he fled for his life because he thought he was going to be killed by Queen Jezebel, because he had killed all the prophets of Baal, or had them killed. He hadn't done it himself. The people turned on them and killed them for their false prophecies and their false ways. So, going back to this particular thing here, it is very important, this verse, that we understand. And I have not found Yahweh to be inaccurate in what he says in anything, quite frankly. That the stone was cut out of the mountain without hands, and it broke in pieces the iron, the bronze, and the clay, the silver and the gold. And those, of course, are the various metals that composed the statue, including the clay in the feet that Nebuchadnezzar saw. The great God has made known to the king what will come to pass after this. The dream is certain, and its interpretation is true. There is a double positive there. He says what will come to pass, the dream is certain, and the interpretation is sure. Here is a depiction of the statue as it is hit by the stone cut out without hands. Daniel, the statue destroyed by a stone cut out of the mountain without hands. And then that is the thing, the kingdom of stone that took over the whole planet, as it took over all the kingdoms of the world. And that, of course, is the Millennium Kingdom. In 2 Peter 1 verse 21 it says, "For prophecy never came by the will of men, but holy men of God spoke as they were moved by the Holy Spirit." And in Amos 3 it says in verse 7, "Surely Yahweh does nothing unless he reveals his secret to his servants the prophets." And then in 8 it says, "A lion has roared. Who will not fear? Yahweh has spoken. Who can but prophesy?" And then those other chapters and verses below, of course, say similar things. But there is the quotation. It says in Amos 3:7, "Surely the Lord does nothing unless he reveals his secret to his servants the prophets." That's why I refer to Jonah, because Jonah in actual fact was a prophet. He was a prophet of who was probably a very successful prophet. He was very angry that the people of Nineveh actually listened to him, because they did. Right from the king down, he jumped off his throne and threw sackcloth and ashes over himself and told everybody else to do the same thing. And of course Jonah was devastated, because he knew what the result would be. Yahweh would not destroy Nineveh, and that wasn't what he wanted. He wanted Yahweh to destroy it, because he knew Yahweh, if he didn't, was going to use this nation, this Assyrian nation, to take his people into captivity, as I said before. My point was, of course, it says in the Bible that Yahweh does nothing unless he first reveals the secrets to his servants, the prophets. Now, right now, today, there are a lot of people telling this nation in ever-growing crescendo what is going to happen. And the amazing part is that even the secular world is now almost occupying the same stage as any prophets of Yahweh, because they are telling us that we are facing economic Armageddon. Whether it's the oil, or whether it's the financial debt that our nations have accumulated, whatever way you look at it, we have a major problem. Whether it's militarily, with China coming online, there are so many areas, whether it's weather-wise, where the weather seems to be changing, there are so many areas where there's confirmations coming through now, where before people would sort of looked and sort of said, oh well, you know, it's not really like that, and it's only a short-term thing. People are quite disturbed And I'm telling you that I get reports in from eminent people, and even going to people like Greenspan, who is the man who is in charge of the American economy. He's the sort of banker to the American economy through the Federal Reserve, was saying the present debts are unsustainable. Apparently they're having to bring in $2.1 billion a day to fund the American debt of $8.2 trillion. And as somebody said in one of those articles, one of the gurus in the financial world, that is also unsustainable because that represents 80% of the world's savings. How long can that continue? In 1 Corinthians chapter 2, verse 7, it says, "But we speak the wisdom of God in a mystery, the hidden wisdom which God ordained before the ages of our glory, which none of the rulers of this age knew, for had they known, they would not have crucified the Lord of glory." And in Luke 23:34, the same thing. Then in Matthew 27:33-50, it says, "And they crucified him and parted his garments, casting lots, that it might be fulfilled which was spoken by the prophets. They parted my garments among them, and upon my vesture did they cast lots." The second empire is the Persian Empire, which, as shown here, is the arms and chest of silver. So you've had the Babylon, which is gold, which is the first beast represented by the lion, and then of course Persia, which is silver and is represented by the bear. In Daniel's vision of the four beasts, in chapter 7, verse 2, Daniel spoke, saying, "I saw in my vision by night, and behold, the four winds of heaven were stirring up the great sea. And four great beasts came up from the sea, each different from the other. The first was like a lion, and had eagle's wings. I watched till its wings were plucked off, and it was lifted up from the earth, and made to stand on 2 feet like a man, and a man's heart was given to it." There we are. Absolutely fantastic description of what the Babylonian Empire, and the first symbol of the Babylonian Empire was like a lion and had eagle's wings. And of course the Babylonian Empire acted like a lion in tearing and smashing up other nations, as I mentioned to you what they did to Jerusalem and the Jews, and then of course what they did to Egypt and anybody else who got in the way. It was a terribly arrogant, very bloody empire, and many were pleased to see it go, like Nineveh before it. There was nobody who had anything kind